safely. Okay, since it's 5, we shall start this session. So my name is My name is Sophia Seung-yoon Lee from Chung-Ang University in South Korea. It's a pleasure to be chairing this session. Just briefly introducing myself. I'm also a co-author of the Basic Income is Coming book, the book called Basic Income is Coming. And so my research background is social policy and basic income and precarious workers. It's quite honoring to have this very exciting 4 papers in this session. The session name is Framing Basic Income in Reality, which is highly directly linked to this conference subject. So we have 4 presenters for this session. And it's a fully online session, but we have a full audience in this room. And before we start, we will have our staff member to briefly introduce how this room, this high-tech room, is going to be run for the audience offline.
Welcome everyone. This is Operator Chung-Ang. Thank you for joining us for the conference session. 22nd BN Congress is conducted in an online-offline hybrid format. Therefore, for those attending in person, please use the microphone when speaking. There are microphones equipped on each table. When you press the push button on the microphone, the camera will track you. So after press the button, please check the camera and then proceed to speak. The session will start shortly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It seems like for me also, I need to press this. Maybe? So the mic comes to me now? I mean the camera? Okay. Okay, there's also room around me. So if you feel too crowded, you can also sit here in the front together. Okay, we'll start. For the second presenter, Etienne Bertet, also the invitation for the Zoom link has been sent once more. So if the presenters hear anything from the second presenter, please also share with us. Hopefully.
I think he's here now.
Oh, you're here? Oh, okay,
Yes.
very good. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll start with the first presentation from University of Macerata, Matteo Pignocchi, Far Right and Basic Income in Italy. It's very exciting. Okay, we'll have 15 minutes for the presentation. And how we will run this is after each presentation, we'll have just quick clarification questions and then move on to the second presenter. And then at the end, we'll go around and then receive all the questions together just to manage the time more wisely. Would that be okay with all the presenters? Is that okay? Okay, thank you very much for the understanding. Okay, we'll start with the first presenter. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes. Could you share the screen slides by yourself?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
sharing the slides. Can you
You
see?
did already. Okay.
Okay. Okay. So thank you. Thank you to I thank the committee, the organizing committee of Big Congress. It's a pleasure to be here. Let me introduce myself. I'm Matteo Pignocchi. I'm an Italian lawyer and postdoctoral researcher in public law at the University of Macerata, as the chair said. I have been studying the topic of basic income for about 8 years, I think, from the perspective of sociology of law, welfare law, and Italian constitutional law. The subject of this paper concerns the relationship between extreme right-wing political movements in the Italian government, in the actual Italian government, and basic income. In fact, in 2022, Italy experienced its first extreme right-wing government since the fascist dictatorship in 1922. The coalition led by Fratelli d'Italia, the party of the current president Giorgia Meloni, as you know, won the elections with its extreme right-wing ally Lega and liberal right ally Forza Italia, the party of Silvio Berlusconi, initially proposing an anti-European Union, anti-establishment vision. First and foremost, I have to do a preliminary introduction. In Italy, there is no form of universal and unconditional basic income, which is only an issue of Italian scientific debate, observing experiments that take place beyond the national borders. Furthermore, in 2018, Italy was one of the last European Union member states to introduce a form of guaranteed minimum income, which is universal but selective, only given to the poor, known as the income for inclusion. Without summarizing the entire debate on the history of Italian welfare in the 20th century, it is worth mentioning that the latter relegated direct monetary transfers to protect workers from job-related risks, such as unemployment, illness, disability, and retirement. Social insurance, recognized as a pillar of the state in Article 38, paragraph 2 of the Italian Constitution, has grown exponentially compared to the measure of social assistance. This, according to the same article of the Constitution, should guarantee all citizens to the means necessary to live. However, the only sustainable mean of support in the post-war political and economic design was supposed to be the work. In a systemic view, the goal was supposed to be full employment. Therefore, social assistance translated into only in-kind transfers. Furthermore, there was resistance, a strong resistance to the first experiments of cash transfers in the 90s, which were modeled on the French revenue minimum d'insertion. Under pressure from the European Union in 2018, Italy opened up to a universal form of income support, eliminating categorical access criteria of income for inclusion, admitting only economical criteria. In 2019, the new coalition government introduced the reddito di cittadinanza, so-called citizenship income, with a much more generous financial scheme than the previous one. The stated objective was the abolition of poverty, said the government, despite the name possibly suggests a universal and unconditional support given to all citizens based on citizenship criteria. It was reduced to a form of support for the poorest in order to reintegrate them into the labor market. The political party Fratelli d'Italia already criticized the measure at the time of its introduction. The presence of the right-wing party Lega in the government coalition led by the Five-Star Movement of Beppe Grillo, promoters of the measure, allowed conservative ideas to tighten access criteria and link exit one to labor market reintegration with an administrative governance of the poor people. About access criteria, there were set in order to exclude migrant people who had not been living in Italy for at least 5 years, 2 of which had to be continuous. This despite the economic sociologist acknowledges that poverty is mostly concentrated in migrant families with large numbers. So it was evident a clearly tendency towards forms of exclusive solidarity and social protection, effectively only for citizens and not for other residents, even if they are part of the communities within the territory. However, the Italian Constitutional Court stated favorably the requirement of a long-term residence for those who have been residing in Italy for 5 years is not discriminatory against migrant people. The reason is as follows. The citizenship income do not provide a basic income standard, but rather focus on labor market reintegration according with minimum income measure from the 90s. This allows lawmakers to freely establish strict access criteria. Regarding reintegration mechanism into the workforce, the debate was intense. The inefficiency of the employment centers of the Italian labor market produces low-quality job offers received by recipients of the Italian guaranteed minimum income. The paradox was that this problem led to much controversies, not about the labor market, but rather about income support system. Indeed, despite it saved millions of people from social exclusion and poverty during the COVID-19 pandemic, the measure was criticized for its welfare-oriented nature. Income support was not justified by the strong work ethic present in Italy, so it had to be closely tied to work even more. Initially, beneficiaries were required to accept at least one of three suitable job offers, later reduced to two. Suitability was based on the duration of the receiving the grant and the number of offers declined. The distance from the offered job location was also legally established as a criterion, which was further restricted with the 2021 reform. In the same year, during the COVID-19 pandemic, current President Giorgia Meloni referred to the citizenship income as the state's method. The citizenship income, was for the citizen worker not a form of security or a right, but rather a palliative for poverty, similar to methadone for opioid addicts. The only solution to poverty would be the freedom provided by work. Every citizen must earn their living, and the poor people cannot remain on the couch. It was this opinion against the category of laissez-faire to characterize the introduction of the so-called anti-catch rules in the original scheme of the measure prior to its abolition in 2022 budgetary law for 2023. In 2022, the coalition of right-wing parties led by the strong consensus of the extreme right-wing Fratelli d'Italia party won the election, partly by proposing the abolition of citizenship income introduced in 2019. A form of citizenship beyond work, as stated by Sophia, is envisioned by the Italian extreme right as a declining, corrupt, and rejectable view. The attempt seems to be to recover a work-based concept of citizen from the 20th century. Work was recognized as a duty in Article 4 of the Constitution. However, in my opinion, this thought on work became outdated and does not adequately focus on the idea of dignified work. The Constitution considers these both a right and a duty. It should be anticipated that the resistance against basic income from the Italian right-wing parties does not translate itself into a critique of precarious intermittent piecework and low-wage work we are facing during the 21st century. The aim is to solve labor market issues by cost reduction for companies without providing new protections for workers. This said, the critics of income support in Italy move from an individualistic reason, criticizing the fact that beneficiaries would not earn their living and would be restricted by the state to poverty condition in which they have fallen, without real forms of social emancipation. These arguments thus seem to conceal what constitutional researchers have called aporophobia, or fear of the poor. This fear has deep roots in the liberal 19th century, in which poverty was seen as a phenomenon of personal responsibility, individual fault, rather than a social and a public issue. The fear of becoming poor produces fear towards those who have become poor due to their own fault. On the other hand, the Italian constitution, as well as the European post-war constitutional tradition and welfare state, addresses poverty as a social issue, with systemic and economic causes, not individual ones. This said, the argument of the Italian extreme right-wing party seems to be quite different from reality, as evidenced by the scheme of the new income support measure introduced by the new Jobs Act. In fact, the new decree, which provides an urgent measure for social inclusion and access to the job world, comes after the budgetary law for 2023 had abolished the citizenship income for the next year and had planned a 7-month transitional period. In place of the reddito di cittadinanza, the new decree introduced two different measures. The so-called inclusion grant to fight poverty, to help poor households with disabled minor or elderly members is financially less generous than the citizenship income, even if it follows its policy scheme. It is categorical, therefore dedicated to poor families with fragile categories, not to all the poor. Moreover, individuals in the beneficiary household who are deemed employable by social services are obliged to follow labor market reintegration courses. Furthermore, they are required to accept the first job offered, whatever it may be, without needing to be deemed switchable. In fact, an employable individual is forced to accept full-time job anywhere in the national territory. They are also forced to accept if the job offer is temporary or part-time within 80 kilometers from their home. From reading the provision, it seems that the poor people who are employable must answer for what the state considers their faults, and furthermore, for the inefficiency of the labor market in their place of residence. The income support system therefore becomes punitive and does not deviate from an authoritarian, non-emancipatory form of so-called welfare, far from a basic income as a right. The second measure, on the other hand, concerns extremely poor households without vulnerable individuals. It is called support for training and work. This measure is a 350 euros grant to allow employable people to take part in training and professionalization courses for a maximum of 12 months. Compared to the inclusion grant, the economic access criteria are lower, the amount and duration of the transfer are shorter. The reason for this different scheme is based on the outdated assumption said before. To fight poverty, the solution would be work. It is already got past by in-work poverty and the phenomenon of the so-called bad jobs. The separation between wage jobs and citizen disposable income seems to be entirely ignored by the Italian extreme right-wing parties. Therefore, if what's said before is true, there are many conclusions to draw. Firstly, the Italian legal system is now the only European system without a form of universal and selective income transfers against poverty, as prescribed by Article 34, paragraph 3 of the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union. It has not anymore the principle of universalism in income support scheme, dividing the poor people between fragile poor people ones, deserving support, and deployable ones. Secondly, the 19th century idea of lazy and undeserving poor people guilty of their poverty has returned in Italy in the Italian political language. They have to be reeducated to work. From the perspective of the political sustainability of basic income scheme, the Italian extreme right-wing parties seems to be a source of inspiration for other right-wing movements in Europe and globally too. The idea of this political movement are far from a democracy of basic income and new form of social citizenship, aiming to recover an anachronistic idea of social participation through work. In reality, in Italy, as of August 1st, 2023, 169,000 people between the ages of 18 and 59 will no longer receive state support against poverty, risking social exclusion once again. In conclusion, the path to basic income in Italy is winding and faces the obstacle of a strong work ethic, even in the new extreme right-wing political movements that will govern the country until 2027. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody among the audience here offline or online, if you have any quick questions, especially related to clarification, we'll take one or two.
Yeah.
Yes, do you have? Okay. Please press the button.
Very briefly, just about French revenue minimum dissertation.
Sorry, I'm sorry. There is a misunderstanding. We will have a question from online, and then we have a question from offline participant here. Okay, I'm sorry, can you go that again? Can you say
Yes,
the question again?
Yes, and my apology for the confusion. I've wanted to ask about this French revenue minimum dissertation. Just a quick 1-2 sentences again. What was that?
What it means.
Yes.
Okay. And then, do you want to go?
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Olaf Ostertag from Germany. And I would like to have the question, I understand it right, that in the history of Italy, the citizenship was attached to working, to be willing to work and to participate in the workforce. And this is still the right-wing viewpoint. But also the right-wing viewpoint is to oppose any kind of refugee flow into the country. So if those refugees are willing to join the workforce and able to join the workforce, isn't that a contradiction in itself in the right-wing point of view? And what do they make of it?
Okay, one more question from
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Since we are talking about Italy, what's one of the most important voices in Italy? Pope Francis. What does he say about the basic income, the universal basic income? In his latest book, Let Us Dream Together, he says to recognize the value of work, the value of non-remunerated work for society is vital to rethink about the post-pandemic world. Therefore, I believe that it is time to explore concepts such as the universal basic income. The universal basic income could redefine the relations in the market, in the labor market, guaranteeing to people the dignity to reject conditions of work that make them imprison in poverty. It would give to the individuals the basic security that they need, eliminating the stigma of the unemployment insurance, and would facilitate them the change from one work to the other, such as more and more the technological imperatives of the world are requiring. For policies like this would help to combine time dedicated to remunerated work with time for the community. It's brilliant. So Italy must listen to Pope Francis.
Okay, we have
Okay,
one.
Matteo.
Matteo, do you want to answer to the 3 brief questions?
Yes, so quickly. Thank you. Thank you. To Kai, the revenue minimum dissertation is the French scheme on the 80s, on the 90s of the last century. I'm so shortly, so you can see it on internet, but it is the scheme, the most famous scheme of guaranteed minimum income in that period. So the Italian scheme of 98 take the model. Okay. The second question, I completely agree. There's no constitutional reason for the right-wing idea of the refugee problems. due to the concept working constitution as a both and as a right, both a right and a duty. So if refugees work while they don't be citizens, I agree. And the third question, yeah, I agree too, Pope Francis. In Italy, we have this problem. Pope Francis doesn't speak about political debate, interpolitical debate in Italy. So he didn't speak about citizenship income. He didn't speak about the new measure of 2023, but he speaks to fight poverty and so on. But he didn't speak about basic income in Italy. Okay, but I agree. I totally agree. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. If there's other questions, we'll come back later at the very end. We'll move on to the second presentation by Etienne Bertet. If you're here, the floor is yours.
Yes. Hi, everybody. My name is Etienne Bertet. I'm from France. I'm member of the French movement for basic income. First, I'm so grateful to have this opportunity to speak in this moment. I hope you can all hear me well. Fine. So I'm gonna share my screen, but first, my inquiries are about research on basic income and how scientific research can answer political questions, because there are many political questions that are supported by scientific knowledge, and my point is to develop this knowledge to be able to take reasonable political decision and to convince people of the efficiency of basic income if it really exists. So I'm gonna share my screen. So here, I think it's good. So I wrote a pretty long article, so I'm not gonna read it by heart, but to give some context, I'm working currently to design a research protocol for a basic income program in West Africa, which is supposed to cover a population of several thousands people. So I have been searching for data available on basic income experimentations throughout the world, and also on the results of these researches, because it is very hard to find results of research on basic income throughout the world. Most of the data available are about the promotion and the explanation of the experimentations, but the results and conclusions are a bit difficult to find, and that's why I would like to thank Miss Rebecca Hasdell, who I don't think is not here, from the Stanford Basic Income Lab, who did a very great umbrella review of basic income experimentations results in English-speaking data. So my article is mostly based on this umbrella review from the Stanford Basic Income Lab, and also from knowledge that I have from our friends of the Bath University, Vibor Mathur and Neil Howard, about what I know on how they do their own experiment in India on the work-free program currently, and a bit of French Clément Caillol, who has worked on the basic income experiment and is currently writing his PhD on the basic income experiments in France. So I'm gonna go straight down to hypothesis. No, I'm gonna go through the principal data. So the most common data terms that Hasdell identifies are poverty and expenditures, labor and employment, healthcare and healthcare access. So those ones. There are other ones, but the four main data thematics are these four ones, and they are the most present throughout every research protocol. So that are the main questions. So how does basic income help to solve poverty, and how people use basic income? How does it affect their consumption? Also, how does it affect work, of course, and employment? And also, how does it affect the education and school performance and school attendance? And how does it affect the health of the population? And those people are in better health because they have a bit more money, or no? So I'm going to go straight to the conclusions and the available data. So I drew some hypotheses from the available data. So what is nice from this work is that she made several conclusions, and then from then we can take these conclusions and transform it into hypotheses. So while we design basic income experiment protocols, we are trying to see if the conclusion tends to confirm or to infirm on our own experimentation. That's why I call this conclusion into hypothesis. So about poverty and expenditures, it tends to demonstrate. So English-speaking research demonstrates that unconditional cash in low and middle-income countries lead to a measurable decrease in poverty. For persons living with disabilities, transfers are generally insufficient to move out of poverty or beyond sustenance living, but evidence for this population was limited to social assistance program. Family earning and profit generally remain constant after families receive cash transfers. No review report on changes to poverty or household earning for advanced economies. There is good evidence to demonstrate that an injection of cash increases household expenditure. Results are positive for food expenditure in all country contexts, and the purchase and ownership of assets such as livestock in low and middle income countries. Less of an impact is observed for the purchase of productive assets, capital such as agricultural tools. So sadly not, there is a decrease in poverty, but it's always related to the context, and it's not a major jump, a major gap of poverty. So for more information on these conclusions, I advise to go check the Basic Income Lab of Stanford, and Rebecca has their work directly, because it's really more detailed, and it's available online on the Stanford Basic Income Lab website. On labor and employment, she concludes that labor, basic income does not affect labor and employment very much. So in a way, in a political decision, it's not something that we should be afraid of. So the conclusion is that we don't have reasons to be afraid of decrease in labor and employment. But what I found very interesting was her conclusion about women. So there is also a very nice theme that is to be developed about women empowerment, which is not common among all research, but from the research that tends to focus on women empowerment, it led to very, very good results. I'm also thinking of the Madhya Pradesh, but other experiments as well. And what happens is that some people, especially women, tends to change their full-time job into a part-time job, so they can take care of people with disabilities or elderly people or people who are dependents of other people. So in a way, they withdraw from the from the paid work, but they work as volunteer to help the community. So in a way, they produce value, and I think it really questioned the feministic view, Occidental point of view of the success in work woman, for example, as we can femininity and gender can affect work. When given a basic income, women can take very different choices. So it's very interesting because it puts the basic income at the center of what it is to have the decision on our own life. And I think to deep and to dive into this question of feminism and femininity and gender decision with basic income is very important, because we can see that there is a contrast between, on the one hand, how feminism is represented in French countries and Occidental countries as a way to, I mean, there is a cliche of successful businesswoman. There is a cliche, and also there are the more traditional gender roles, and basic income just is in the middle and give choice to people to take one road or the other without the influence of media or of political of policymaker. I think there is something very which is at the core of basic income, and that can picture what basic income is all about when it comes to decision making. Also about education, a lot of positive data on education, improved school performance and school attendance. So it's very nice also for policymakers to have data on education, and education is very good way to promote basic income as it comes to very positive outcomes. And health and healthcare access are also very positive. So education and healthcare access are a must-have in every research protocol, as they are the most positive outcomes, and they are linked to important political inquiries, political questions and responsibilities. And so health and education are research outcomes that can help create trust within the political classes. So I think I'm about the end of my time. Maybe I should take more time to give space for questions.
You can take one or 2 minutes for conclusion if you want.
Okay, so the last part of so this article I sent it by mail to this room organization. I don't know if they're gonna put it online publicly, but I hope you can access it. There is the other important part is that from the conclusions and hypothesis that we can draw from the available data on basic income is that it supports that I call scientific and political goals of research. So I think for me it's very important to make the separation between what is scientific research and what are the political goals, and they have to be thought independently. So I wrote a part for every of the four main data team to link them to political decision and how the scientific questions, the scientific reasoning can help build political decision, but also to draw a separate line to make the difference between both. I think it's very important that because what I say is that science is about the ever doubting. It's about doubting always questioning what we think, what we take for granted, and political thinking is exactly the opposite, as it's about being convinced of what of our reasoning and trying to convince other. And because we have to convince other, we have to convince ourselves. So it's very important to make this distinction, and that's how we can protect ourselves against the confirmation bias, the bias of confirmation, and not the, yeah. That's for my conclusion.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody from offline and online have quick questions? Yes?
Does it work now? Yes. Thank you for your presentation. My name is Wonjeri from Korea, and
Do you hear?
do you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, good. I actually designed the basic income experiment in Gyeonggi province in rural basic income. It's a remote village, 4,000 residents, and it's a local currency basic income for 5 years experiment. And I wonder, it's been like 1.5 years now since it started, and actually we actually observed two differences that the experiment made for 1.5 years. One is population. It's like 10% population increase in a year. So it's a big increase because it's very remote village and only 4,000 people. That's one thing. And the other thing is when we observe that region, we see many more residents and businesses. So it's entrepreneurship. So we haven't had a survey, interim surveys. We just did pre-test survey. So we don't know what's actually going on now, but just my observation is
I cannot hear the question.
Yes.
You cannot hear the question? Can you hear the?
Confused?
Ah, okay.
Yes.
Is it okay?
We hear it from far, so I'm not sure. So it's a different person who's asking the question. No.
It's a different question. Do you hear now?
No.
Sorry, I don't know whether you see me, but so my name is Wonjeli, and I designed the basic income experiment in Korea, in Gyeonggi province. It's a remote village, 4,000 residents, just 4,000, and for 5 years. And it's been 1.5 years, and we see two. I have two observations without any test. It's just my observation, and one is increase in population. More people are moving in. Actually, it didn't happen. But it's like huge. It's 10% population increase in 1.5 years. So it's huge. That's one thing. The other thing is I see more businesses. So it's entrepreneurship piece. So I wonder if you could have hypothesis part. In your hypothesis part, we could have two hypotheses. If we have an experiment in a region, if it's a regional experiment, we could have an increase in population. The other one is if we can have a hypothesis about entrepreneurship, increase of business. So that was my question.
Thank you. Did you have a question?
He is speaking about the basic income experiences in Africa. Isn't that so? In Africa, have you mentioned that you are making research on the basic income experiences in Africa? Is that what I understand? Is that so?
Yes. So I'm just building a research protocol for now. So
Okay.
I'm not following current program. I'm working on a protocol, and I hope the program will be able. We will be able
Okay.
to begin.
Then
the
I
program.
would like to recommend you to visit in Kenya, where I have been January 2019 to see the experiences of the Give Directly basic income of modest basic income, $22 per month to all adults in the rural areas, men and women. And I went there and asked for 7 days. When you received the basic income, a modest one, did you start to work more or less? Much more. I started to plant so many more vegetables, fruits, and so on. The other one that said I was able to buy a new fisherman apparel to fish more and more. The other one bought a motorcycle to transport people and so on. What were the other consequences? Well, when the money comes, husband and wife, we get together to decide how are we going to spend the money? What is the first priority? The education of our children, their books, and so on. What were some of the main consequences? The emancipation of women. Violence against women diminished 51%. Sexual violence against women diminished 66%. So I would recommend you to see the effects of the basic income in Kenya. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We'll right away go to answer. Would you like to answer right away?
Yeah, I can answer because there is a link between the business. So thank you for your question and your remarks. Very rich. I'm gonna start with the increase in capital because there is a link between both questions. So on the Hasdel's work, she noticed that few data is available on across the different experiments that are available, but only in English-speaking languages. So that's the point of that's a bias. But she doesn't seem to conclude of a certain increase in capital and investment in resources like entrepreneurship. So from what I saw, entrepreneurship rises where basic income is, but it depends on the context. For example, in very rich countries, it's people will have different strategy that in different countries because of the different risks depending on context of what it means to develop your own business. So people in rich country will more follow new formation. People in other country will like in rural area in countryside they can build entrepreneurship. So only few data is available now, and also a problematic point of English-speaking work is that there is a lot of data available, mostly quantitative data, and there is a lot of random control trials. They try to build epistemology with random control trial. So it's a lot of quantitative data, and it becomes a bit difficult to understand motivations and the relationship of decisions making and the context of this decision making. So mostly what we had from previous years in English is data about results, outcomes, but we don't know so much about the dynamics. And Give directly that I know quite well. They are the principal representative of random control trials, but I know also that from the recent year, they try to get more in touch with interviews to understand the processes of thinking of people who receive basic income. And they also provide great data about women conditions of life. So what the second speaker say, I agree totally. Give directly is in a good position to produce data about women position and basic income in African countries, especially in Kenya.
The first question, can you answer shortly about the demographic?
Yeah, about the demographic, it's really not a common theme of English-speaking data, but I think that's very interesting. So it depends of how the basic income is designed, because if people who designs the program will say, okay, only people who are in this city at one moment, they will receive basic income, and newcomers, if they come, they do not receive basic income. Or if they say the contrary, it affects the things really differently. But it's very, very nice and very significant data that the demography increases because people come in. I think it's something that that should be researched with the thinking of, okay, because in Occident, in French also, basic income and immigration are something quite difficult to think, and immigration is seen as something that can be problematic for basic income, but also it's interesting to see how we can turn the tide. And like, for example, in countryside, like where people tend to not go so much and people tend to go more in cities than in countryside, the fact that a remote village has basic income, it can increase population. I think it's something that we can see things differently. It's very, very interesting.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we will move on right away to the third presentation by Reinhard Huss. Are you ready?
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
So my name is Reinhard Huss, and I'm actually based in Leeds in England, part of the UBI lab network, but at the moment I'm sitting in Heidelberg in Germany. And I actually want to connect to Etienne's presentation about the research findings, because what I'm missing is ecological environmental issues in findings and to create a grandchildren-friendly society, and whether UBI contributes to it or not, because this is, I think, a very important issue at the moment. And I will try to share my screen. I hope you can see it. If not, let me know. Okay. So my presentation is how should UBI be framed, financed, and delivered to make it a convincing tool for a just transition to a green society. Below the title, you can find my contact details and affiliation. And I would like to receive your comments on this topic. As you can see, my presentation is work in progress, an ambitious topic with many issues to cover. Like the window cleaners of this high-rise building, I see clarity for new institutions called Commons Wealth Funds to finance our basic income.
I think the slide is not going forward.
Isn't it?
It's on the first page at the moment.
Oh, I don't understand why it's not going. Okay, let me try again. Can you
yes,
see the
we
second?
see now. Yes, the cleaning.
I'm trying to make it full screen. That's why. Is it going forward now?
It's not full screen, but we are on the second page at the moment.
Can you see now the third one, objectives?
No, we cannot see the third one. We are
Okay,
looking
so
at the
then-
preamble.
Okay, sorry. I will
It's
try
okay.
then to go out of full screen and do it in this way. Can you see the second one?
Yes.
Okay, so I will. So as I said, my presentation is work in progress, and it's an ambitious topic with many issues to cover. And like the window cleaners of this high-rise building, I see clarity for new institutions called Commons Wealth Funds to finance our basic income. The objectives of my presentation are to explore convincing ways how to link the provision and financing of basic income and to propose green and just BI financing institutions. The outline of my presentation includes 4 sections. First, some background information and what I call misleading advocacy for basic income. Second, framing of basic income. Third, financing and delivery of basic income. And finally, my conclusions. The background: searching several economic textbooks, I found the following gaps of mainstream economics. There is no consideration of our commons, such as air, water, or soil. This leads to the ignored free rider phenomenon by producers and consumers, and the damage and pollution of our commons through extraction, production, and waste. The concept of a life-supporting biosphere does not exist in economics. As a consequence, we are experiencing the climate and biodiversity crisis linked to our economic system. Private capital owners seem to be exempt from any moral liability. A historical example is the compensation of slave owners for their loss of slaves as property. Similar fossil fuel companies and states are not prepared to accept their historic liability for the climate crisis. What do I mean with misleading BI advocacy? Should basic income be presented as free money or instead as a reward for a simple lifestyle protecting our biosphere and a compensation for the free riding of our commons by most economic participants? It is important to present BI and the financing as 2 sides of one policy with a coherent approach. Some BI advocates suggest that we finance BI similar to health and education services with earned income tax. This may be easy to calculate and explain to the public. However, will it generate public support for the introduction of basic income? I'm not convinced. Basic income requires a redistribution of money in society, while health services and education require the spending of money on infrastructure, goods, and workforce. This is an important difference. Also, this section will discuss the important concepts of costs, affordability, and feasibility of BI. These concepts pose important challenges in the promotion of BI because they are often used in a misleading way to undermine our advocacy. Earlier, I've already mentioned the misleading image of BI as free money, symbolized here by the money tree. We can use different cost perspectives to analyze a BI policy. Costs and benefits of a BI policy are not standard calculations with a unique, correct answer. Instead, there are different cost and benefit perspectives. Therefore, the costs of a BI policy depend on the perspective of your analysis. On this slide, I have listed 5 perspectives derived from pharmacoeconomic analysis and relevant for BI policy. I will focus on the first 2, state and society. If a state provides basic income, the costs are presented as extremely high, multiplying the number of BI recipients with the amount of BI. However, from a societal cost perspective, the costs are 0 because BI money is just redistributed in society. The whole society does not lose or gain. If the benefits are included in the analysis, such as reduced crime and improved health, the costs of BI may actually be negative from a societal perspective. Affordability is often used as argument against BI. It's just not affordable. However, often no specific criterion for affordability is given, and what is the threshold when a basic income becomes unaffordable. I suggest that we use gross domestic product or GDP as criterion. GDP is the monetary measure of all final goods and services produced in a country in a time period such as a year and exchanged in a market. We should decide which percentage of GDP distributed as basic income is or is not affordable and justify this decision. Feasibility. Another argument against basic income is often stated as it is just not feasible. I suggest that we separate feasibility into 2 components, political will and public demand. Unfortunately, most politicians are followers rather than leaders, so they are unlikely to embark on new political journeys such as BI unless there is a strong public demand. Therefore, we as BI movement need to create a critical mass of people who understand concept and financing of BI and demand from political decision makers the introduction of a basic income institution. I will now discuss financing and delivery of a basic income. To do this, I start with our actual economic model and its serious blind spots. The term blind spot normally means a spot which the eye cannot see. I use it as a metaphor for parts of our reality which are not seen by our actual economic model. A new embedded economic model, as shown on this slide, reveals these blind spots. First, our current economic model ignores that the economy is embedded in society and the biosphere of Earth. Both are important boundaries for economic activities. Second, our various commons, such as air, water, and soil, make important contributions to our economic activities, but they are ignored in conventional economics. These economic blind spots are the justification for a green and just basic income. I argue that a basic income is a necessity to create a hospitable and convivial future for humanity on our planet. I will next explain what I mean with green economy, just transition, behavioral fees, capital and dividend sharing, theoretical background of my argument, and the delivery of a basic income. There are 3 key differences between our actual and the future green economy. A change from a linear degenerative to a circular regenerative economy. Instead of ignoring, it includes various commons as essential parts of our economy. It treats extractivism of non-renewable resources and excess harvest of renewable resources as harm to our commons. What does a just transition to such a green economy mean? Restrict and sanction degenerative economic behavior such as soil erosion, reduce and charge for waste and pollution of our commons such as air, water, soil, for instance, the release of human-made chemical substances into our environment, minimize and compensate humanity for extractivism and renewable resource harvests by corporations. Encourage personal light ecological footprint with basic income. The last point means people who just live on a basic income should not be seen as a problem, but as an asset to societies. What does a just transition mean in terms of history and its impact on our societies? We need to compensate societies for harm caused by slavery, colonialism, past extractivism, and pollution, such as carbon dioxide. We need to share with societies dividends and wealth creation because of private exploitation of land, capital, and use of legal commons and public infrastructure. How can this just transition to a green economy be implemented? We need to create several nested and complementary commons wealth funds to pay for PI as dividend. We should introduce behavioral fees for the exploitation of our commons, introduce capital dividends and green assets sharing to finance local, national, and international commons wealth funds. Behavioral fees, similar to environmental, Pigovian, excise taxes, are charged for the so-called free use of our commons by firms as legal entities and individuals. Capital assets are collected as reparation for slavery, colonialism, past and present extractivism, and pollution of our commons. Company dividends are collected as compensation for private for-profit exploitation of our commons. Local adaptations of this approach are necessary to take into account specific local circumstances. Current examples of behavioral fees include parking, congestion, and emission fees. Behavioral fees should be charged at each level of the economic process, such as production, manufacture, distribution, and purchase. For instance, long-lasting chemical compounds. My proposal is rooted in the theory of collective actions of Elinor Ostrom. You can find more information on this slide for your personal exploration, but I will not go into details during this presentation because of time constraints. In summary, I propose to use behavioral fees and the sharing of capital dividends and assets for the financing of BI. There are other options which are mentioned here. An important issue is the protection and maintenance of BI dividends. Again, there are several options. I suggest that we create autonomous BI institutions similar to Social Security in some countries. The actual design and functioning of states do not give me any confidence that states and their governments will protect BI in the long term. BI delivery. Secure and reliable BI delivery is another important topic to convince people of BI. Please find some ideas on this slide as food for thought and for further discussion.
Thank you very much.
My conclusions, basic income, final slide. Basic income should be framed as a dividend and compensation for the free use of our commons and presented as a necessary ingredient for our just and rapid transition to a grandchildren-friendly society with an embedded green economy. And that's the end. Thank you. And here are some references and selected bibliography which I have used for my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm sorry for the interruption.
No problem.
Thank you. I think due to time, we are going to move on to the next presentation right away. And at the end, we collect questions for both two presentations. Would that be okay?
With me, it's fine. Yeah.
Thank you for your understanding. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to Kai's presentation, which also the title is very interesting. Would you like to start right away? The floor is yours.
Yes, I gladly do so. Thank you for the opportunity. Briefly clicking this button. I actually feel that logically from everything that has been presented so far, I'm glad that I hope that my presentation also connects well to what has just been said. And I saw someone in the audience And now I'm also convinced that I'm doing one thing in this presentation.
Oh, now it's fine. Good.
Great. Okay, so the title of this presentation obviously is Universal Basic Income as a litmus test between progressives and conservatives from a system theoretical perspective. In it, I'm going to present first a system theory, mainly by Niklas Luhmann. Next, I'm comparing, to stay in this analogy of a litmus test, I'm going to compare universal basic income with water. And then lastly, I'm going to outline not only my approach, but like my approach and which is closely linked to how I applied for this conference as one of the organizers for the Basic Income March in Berlin. Okay, and myself, I've got a Master of Arts in Geography. That's also why I had to check a few of this, of a few of these theories. And now, so let's start with Niklas Luhmann and how he looked at a society. He basically, even if we think about the entire history of the world, he basically only saw 3 eras in human society, divided between an archaic times, high cultures, and the modern era. None of these are like clearly outlined or clearly differentiated, like they overlap, they jump forward and backward, and how we can understand it. Let's say that we nowadays live in a modern era where we have like different function-specific systems, like the politics, like the economy, like the academia. And there's a legal system. And of course, there is a religion. There are religions. Main point of differentiation is that in the time of high culture, so to speak, there was like, it was very centralized. Like there was one almighty institution who had all the knowledge, had all the power, who had all the things. But there's also a certain limit up to which that's possible, and a limit of internal complexity, a limit of generalization that's possible to make sense anymore, to just make sense. So, but what combines all of these examples of social systems is the communication taking place. So that is the key that even is a defining thing in all of these historical times that we had. Communication is the big connecting thing between everything. So once more, very briefly, these function-specific systems, they kind of represent a primary order, but they are not real. Like I'm not talking about the legal system in Germany or within the European Union. It's just about a basic understanding that something like a political realm and an economic realm exist. And one of the more important things then is that each of these systems has its own logic. In politics, it's about government and oppositions. In the economic system, it's often about having or not having money. In the legal system, it's about something being legal or illegal. In the academic system, it's about something being true or false. And at the same time, and then since due to these binary values, they there are also like goals that don't overlap. They are like controversial point of views appear, and what Reinhard just described as blind spots in system theory, I think we could say we use side codes like justice or sustainability or anything else to also impact those other parts, to help differentiate better. But the main binary values will not change. So the question becomes, how do we achieve a desirable present with a circular economy and like a good balance between human systems and natural systems, etc. A system theoretical argument, and this also goes back already to the very first presentation by Matteo about Italy. It's like this complaint about the lazy poor and so on. Such a conversation, like such topic in system theory, basically it can be pushed aside because we want to focus on a better interoperability between those systems. Like it's much more important to see how we can have good decision-making processes that we work towards a desirable approach, like a habitable planet, etc. And then like besides the question, like how do we achieve it? Why have we not achieved it yet? And this is the part now where I'm going to compare universal basic income to water, and I try to say it like this. I also like Reinhard's differentiation between the state and and society at large. I guess it's helpful because also like if I pick the very first search result from Google describing conservatism, it basically tells me, like I'm focusing now on the second line. It's like holding a political views that favors free enterprise, private ownership, socially traditional ideas, etc. It focuses on that, and then if I take everyone's not favorite, like a questionable, it is ChatGPT. I typed in what is progressivism, and it gave me this explanation. It's a philosophy or movement that advocates for various reforms and changes in society with certain goals of like development. UBI basically can achieve both in the way how it's designed, like it can support both of those. But I really want to stress that I think UBI also can draw conclusions from both sides. What has worked well in the past? What are like important experiences? And though these are just like I don't present a very concrete example at this point, but everything that I say, this is based on global experiences and on theories that resonate well. I hope. If not, we can discuss about it later on, and you can ask more questions. What I mean about it, like drawing lessons from both sides, but also as being based on global experiences, is that the UBI directly challenges the existing paradigms. Changes in a constant thing, always going on. We cannot stop it. So it deserves a little. So there's always going to be some change. But most importantly, UBI increases the power to say yes and no in each of these systems that I just presented. So I do not want to, like if someone decides to cooperate in a field, you can say yes and no, and you cannot be exploited. And this is also like on a social level connected with a critique of capitalism, where it's often about separation and segregation. UBI could of course counter that. And UBI also will confront us ourselves with the question what money cannot buy, or whether we then have to decide if we want to be a market society or a society applying market principles. And do we want to apply market principles in education and health? I have an opinion on that one. Okay. So everything from what I just said, like I'm talking just from a very personal perspective, and like I wanted to, like, even the theories that I just mentioned, or the critique of, let's say, capitalism or conservatism, like this is something that I feel in my body. I need to experience this for myself. At the same time, with what I described first about that communication is key, that's the best thing that we can do, and we can communicate in many, many ways. That's also why we organized the basic income marches from 2019 to 2022. In those, we create platforms, we share ideas, we share frameworks, we share experiences. And yeah, communication is really the key. And now I'm showing you one example. And if you look around in your offline audience, I bet you will recognize at least one person.
Wir müssen die Ressourcen den Menschen jetzt direkt in die Hand geben, damit nicht eine Legion neuer Armer entsteht. Das hat der UN-Generalsekretär Antonio Guterres bereits am 19. März 2020 gesagt.
So, and then this is all about my almost the last slide. Again, I consider system theory as useful to better understand specific social logics, to not get distracted or even separated by certain discourses and confusing isms. System theory is useful to ask in which type of society we want to live. It describes some prerequisites and conditions to achieve interoperability and good decision-making processes to then meet our basic needs that we have. And I also think that system theory in this regard is useful to create better convincing arguments for universal basic income, so that it's not a thing that serves its own purpose, or that I only want universal basic income because machine learning is improving and they're maybe taking away our jobs. Yes, that's also true, but in addition, we also want to live in a modern world society and want to think about modern world problems, and not like problems from past centuries because some crazy king, billionaire, or tech billionaire is doing weird stuff. Like I want to talk about more better things too. Yeah, and also what Reinhard said before, he wanted to frame UBI as a dividend or as a compensation for the use of resources. I also see it like a duty, as a compensation even for the right that big companies can do global trade and so on, then they also need to pay their fair share. And on the opposite side, we have like the active right to choose the work, but I also think like we have just the basic rights to be compensated for what's going on around us. Thank you very much for your for listening.
Thank you very much. We have just very few minutes left. So any questions for Reinhard and also Kai? Yes.
Yes, thank you very much to both of the last presentators. And I would especially like to thank Kai for mentioning myself. Hello, Kai, and greetings to Berlin. Reinhard and Kai, you both have presented under the title of Basic Income in Reality, which is the title of our Congress. And many discussions on this Congress now are focusing around commons and collecting wealth collecting a share from the wealth that is taken from the commons, and this being distributed as a basic income. Is it, in your opinion, perhaps the right way to go to first think about where to take the funding from, and then introducing the share of this funding as a basic income to make it a reality? So is this the way to go, instead of first saying what is the aim of a basic income and how high should it be? How high should it be to be distributed to each and every person, each individual, so that we can choose this different path to show the people that basic income can be made a reality and is to be implemented in reality in our societies?
Did you have a question? Yeah.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I actually have a question for Reinhard. So you mentioned on just transition, and that you said we need to compensate societies for harm caused by the history of slavery and colonialism and things like that. I was wondering who decides and like how do we measure like what is adequate way of compensating those societies or people or communities? Because like someone might consider something as enough and adequate, but the recipient or someone else might think this is not enough. And other than human ways, like there are communities that have like disappeared because of colonialism and slavery. And how are we in the nature? How are we going to compensate those? Like, how do we measure that?
Okay. Thank you very much. Can we have the answer 1 minute each? Less than 1 minute each. Thank you very much. Yeah, the floor is to Reinhard and Kai.
Okay, shall I start quickly?
Yes, please go ahead.
I mean, there are certain things you can calculate, like carbon emissions over historical times. It has already been done, what companies contributed and what states contributed. And also in slavery, you can calculate which companies exist nowadays, and if you have historians to analyze what they were based on in terms of using slavery for their startup and growth. I mean, what you cannot calculate, and that is actually a discourse in society, is how much is now the adequate compensation. I mean, there is no mathematical answer to this question. This has to be discussed and agreed. But for me, the compensation should be in basic income dividend. So for instance, Africa has suffered a lot from slavery and colonialism. Now, instead of trying to find individuals who have suffered more or less, my opinion is everybody as compensation living in Africa now, because in many African societies and countries, they have suffered from these effects. Everybody should get a basic income based on these dividends. And yes, there will be an enormous change in society because companies will have to give up some of their assets into a Commonwealth fund in order to compensate. there was, I mean, the first question, which I was directed to both of us. I can't remember what was the question. Can the moderator?
How about we move on to Kai to answer this question first. Yes.
I kind of I try to follow answer as follows.
Focusing on the finance first, funding,
exactly, like
rather than the aim of the basic income.
Exactly, like if we, from which point do we start, from the objectives or from the way how to finance it? I'd have a slightly different approach. While I understand where it's coming from, before I was talking very broadly about society at large, but in this case about financing, I often want to make it as concrete as possible. For instance, the German tax system and the German social system, they are not really linked and combined. They often like put money into this box and then it gets like, it's a very fine-grained system to distribute everything, but just kind of make sure that you have a good coupling between those two things, and then slowly start to roll out UBI, perhaps with students, perhaps with the elderly, and so on. And because they have maybe based in a certain basic needs that are not met yet.
Okay, thank you very much.
Can I just quickly add? I think basic income and financing are two sides of the same coin. They should not be separated, because that creates, I think, a lot of misunderstandings. And if you finance basic income through income tax, especially earned income tax, I'm sure you get a lot of opposition. That's why I'm opposed to it, because people say, why should my earned money be redistributed in society? I think you need to have a good justification what money is redistributed for what reason. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, the presentations, the questions, and the audience. Thank you very much. We'll end the session here.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Have a good day.
Okay.
Good evening.
Here's a search notice. There are many please. There's a youth forum event at ECC Center at 7 o'clock. So if anyone is interested in it, so please join the forum. And all of today's programs are done. So if you have receivers yet, please turn it back to the lobby and get your ID. Thank you.
Thank you. This is the youth forum event.